Welcome everybody to Workplace Conversations podcast. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Sarah Hurren. Sarah is working at NAB, currently in a volume recruitment campaign role. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, very good. Of course, Sarah, you and I used to work together back in Link, wasn't it? Link
Yeah,
recruitment days.
a couple of years ago now.
Yes. So you've had quite a long-standing career in recruitment, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've spent, I pretty much did agency recruitment and then moved to CBA to lead one of the internal teams over there. Was just under 12 years, I think,
Yep.
working within talent and TA for CBA. And then I've been, been
hmm
with NAB for about 6 months now. So I joined in April.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think we're really entering a really interesting period in regards to recruitment. There's an enormous amount of discussion. Certainly, I've been following a lot of the discussion on LinkedIn about the impact of recruitment that's coming, particularly obviously led by artificial intelligence. What's your view in regards to what do you see as the sort of the short term and longer term impacts of AI on recruitment?
There's a few different buckets I think of it. So if I start with external recruitment and for volume specifically, we spend hours looking at things like application forms and resumes to try and identify who's got like stability in their background. One of the biggest drivers for volume recruitment is addressing frontline early attrition. So that 0 to 6 months is very
Yeah.
problematic. And I think the benefits now of AI coming in is that predictor of any forward attrition. So looking at data within a resume and application form and then determining where there's a risk and then being able to articulate that to a recruiter and then to the hiring manager. Whilst today we have to spend time reviewing a resume, looking at how many times someone's moved, what their drivers are, and then digging more deeply. So I think that kind of first line attrition is a good one. The second one is just recruiter time and productivity. So we spend so much time reviewing candidates that they just don't have the right experience to be considered. And I think AI will come in and give us back some of that time so that we can have a really quality conversation with a candidate and become more consultative rather than trying to sort of spend time with candidates that just don't have the right experience or motivations to be successful in a sort of volume capacity. And then the third bucket for me is the candidate experience itself. Like a lot of our assessments and technology for volume recruitment takes a lot of time
Yes.
and is not intuitive. So you might go from one assessment to another. Some can take 15 minutes, some 20, some 30, some even 40 minutes. I think AI will allow us to be more responsive to the candidate's outcomes to then determine who should move forward and give the candidate feedback as well based on their inputs, which I think is a much better candidate experience than just getting rejection emails with no feedback or data or insights into why.
Yes. There's a discussion around the potential for more automated tools to provide feedback to candidates. So, even the possibility of, say, an avatar. What's your view on that? Do you think that's a good thing, or there are
100%.
people? Yeah, because there are people who would say that that's impersonal.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, our internal recruitment teams. We can't have, we can't afford to have recruiters sat there giving feedback to every candidate. And, we might get sort of 400 applications for a single role. So this gives the candidate something to take away, some kind of, it doesn't end with a brick wall. It gives you feedback, things to focus on, ways to improve your resume, ways to improve your application data in order to be more successful. So where it is impersonal, it's more personal than an email rejection. And as much as we'd love to have the recruiters call every candidate, it's just not a viable option in this sort of cost-conscious sort of time and market.
Yeah, it's the contrast factor, isn't it? Because there's the forgetting the fact that you're getting a pretty impersonal response now. So, and perhaps it's a matter of candidates simply getting used to it.
Yeah, for sure.
As well, isn't it?
For sure.
Yeah. So in terms of the selection process, what do you find from your years of experience? What do you tend to find makes a really good selection process? If you're really thinking about getting good quality outcomes. You talked about there the potential for someone to, to stay, that they stay beyond, 6 months, but build a career with the organisation. What do you find are the most important ingredients for selection?
Yeah, this is where it gets really tricky for volume, and I think people underestimate the skill required in identifying the right people for volume and frontline roles. There's an art and a science to recruitment. I think us sort of seasoned recruiters would agree to this. The art is kind of knowing which two people can work well together from a direct report and a people leader perspective, and that kind of the chemistry between them, I guess, in terms of a relationship and coachability and that kind of thing. Where we have gaps for volume is that where you don't look for specific skill data in a resume, we're not looking for the skill, it's inferred by the background that the candidate has. So we have to dive a lot more deep to get that sort of like science and data and evidence part in order to help us and the hiring managers make a better decision. Some of the things that I've looked at in the past is how do we assess the motivational fit? And we can't just use like behavioral interviewing to assess motivational fit. Like the negative of AI is that it provides, and chatbot, etc., provides ChatGPT, sorry, rather, provides you with a sort of black and white answer to a motivational fit question. But one of the main fundamentals is understanding motivational drivers. If you're working in a contact center, are you happy to sit on the phone for 8 hours a day, heavily rostered with calls dropping in? As soon as your call's finished, the next call drops in, and that kind of environment. So being able to get some data behind, like, are you motivated to do that role? Is it going to suit your lifestyle, your life preferences, how you like to work, etc.? The second part then is potential. Like, how do we assess potential? How do we know that once you are faced with a customer that, in a contact center environment, aren't usually calling to give you a virtual high five? They're calling to have a conversation because they've got a problem. So how do we assess that you've got the potential to ask the right questions to be able to find the right solution to one of the customer's problems as well? And then the third piece is growth mindset and learning. Like, how do we know that you can learn? So this is where AI and the tech stack that we've got sort of evolving in the market now is really helping to provide some data, some predictive data to help us make better quality decisions and then see that carry through. What I've seen in terms of success is where we do get the right balance of that science and art, you do get better quality hiring decisions. So you see less unplanned absence, you see less wait time for customers and shrinkage in terms of coming off the phone to ask a question from our colleagues that are on the phone, and therefore a better outcome ultimately for the customer. So it's really critical to get that right balance to be able to make quality hiring decisions, particularly where it's not a specific technical skill that you're looking for.
So, I mean, you don't have to name particular providers or tools, but what kinds of assessments would you bring in? Like, what are we talking about?
So, I mean, there's heaps in the market that are brilliant. I've worked with quite a few over the years. I think the main ones, I mean, for graduate, if I talk about graduates for a second, graduates love like the gamification pieces, whilst your candidates that are applying more for like a retail or a contact center role aren't such a fan of that. There's a different demographic, particularly if you're regional and remote. Therefore, if we're putting lots of gamification assessments in, we tend to lose candidates from the process. And you've got to get that balance between candidate attraction and then assessment and selection to get the right fit. I mean, for example, a branch role in Ararat is not going to have the same candidate application base as a Metro Melbourne. It's just totally different. So we need to be able to have flexibility there. So grads, gamification, problem solving, that's their sort of cup of tea. For retail, what I've seen work is more scenario-based assessments. So where we can put the candidate in the position of something that is relatively simple without too much sort of terminology. I mean, I've obviously got a lot of banking experience, but not every candidate comes from like a retail or a hospitality background will be able to speak to banking as a first sort of interview and assessment. So, but scenarios where it involves painting the picture of the type of conversations that you might have, navigation of multiple systems, and trying to demonstrate what that would look like practically within the role helps the candidate to understand what they might be getting themselves in for, which is critical to that motivational fit, but also allows us as recruitment and hiring teams to then think about what potential they might have, and recognizing there is some support that's needed to be able to, it's never going to be a perfect response, but it's enough to understand whether there is, you know, a dedicated focus on solving the customer problem, in being warm, in being open, in being curious, and those kind of things. I think the other part is the things like realistic job previews are brilliant. So show the candidate a video, imagery, sentences that describe the environment, and allow them to assess against that. And quite often that's not even for a recruitment team to assess. It's more for the candidate to decide whether they want to progress or not.
Yes.
And allow them to opt out before they are under pressure in an assessment center or an interview, or, you know, if they do make it through, to prevent job shock once they start in the role as well.
Yes, I like that, job shock. Yeah. So, you know, that requires a fair bit of planning though too, doesn't it? To be able to, you know, it's a very, you know, scientific, and I love that because it's a very scientific approach
For sure.
to the roles. So, and like for a one-off job, how would you work that? So for those people who are perhaps watching and thinking, well, you know, I have a bunch of one-off positions. Do you think is that realistic also from a resourcing point of view? Is it possible to do that and not be overwhelmed?
I think you've got to sort of look at what problem you're trying to solve for. And I think recruitment is all about problem solving. And I'm massively motivated by solving wicked problems. So hence why I find it quite fascinating. So when we're talking in a volume capacity where you're recruiting consistently into one particular job family or area, it's worth investing in the technology to support that. If you are in a smaller sort of team environment and looking to get a similar outcome, there are still ways in which to do that without spending lots of money on tech, and things like getting a success profile right. And a success profile is a mixture of a position description and then the challenges within the role. So what I mean by that is, you know, for example, spending time walking the lived experience of the people doing the role, or understanding in greater depth what bad things happen when you're in the role. It's not all, you know, sunshine and lollipops. There are challenges to every role. So articulating them very, very clearly, and understanding those at length, so that you're able to explain that to the candidate instead of overselling the role. I think in recruitment, we very much try and overmarket a role, and it's unfair on the candidate. It's also unfair on the people leader or the hiring manager. So being much more clear on, look, here's all the good stuff. You know, you're going to get interaction with the business. You're going to get that career development that you're looking for. The salary's great, location, office, all that sort of stuff, tick, tick, tick. But these are the challenges that you're going to face. Like, the technology might not be what you hoped it would be. The processes might need evolution. You might need to build a team, or you might need to spend time thinking about the marketing strategy or the approach, and investing in that, and being very clear on what those challenges might be. I think often we do this in an interview, but we don't brief the candidate up front to allow them to think about that. So what you're doing is then bringing some of that realistic job preview sort of insight or assessment into just a phone screen or an upfront conversation. So that's kind of how you can tackle it from a probably more of an individual perspective.
Yeah, fabulous. So what challenges do you find with the hiring managers to be able to take them through that job analysis process? Because I'm sure that you would find it's like, oh, come on, I just haven't got the time for that. Let's just get on with it. But you're saying you do need to sit them down and spend a bit of time with them. How do you go about that process of influencing them around that?
I think it comes back to the problem that you're trying to solve for as well. Like, if your attrition data is, you know, through the roof, then that's enough, I think, evidence to go, it's worth investing here. Like, the investment here is going to save that investment when you've got half your team sort of turning over after 6 months. On an individual basis, though, it's kind of, you know, move slow in order to get the right solution. It comes back to, I can fill a role based on a generic, you know, position description, but it might not necessarily be the right person in the right role. So for me, it's kind of sitting down and say, if you truly want me to find the best possible person, then we need to really understand like the depth of the role. And most of the time, I don't really see much pushback. in that regard. Like it's always been very welcomed. I think
Right.
the challenge is normally when you're taking people from a customer facing role, like a branch manager, like our branch managers need to be spending time with our customers.
Yeah.
So taking them away from the customer can be tricky. So
Yeah.
it's just finding the right time and appropriate, conversation to have where it's
Mm.
not taking them away from that and being more considerate of their time as well.
Yeah. Okay. Coming back to selection, what's your view around personality profiling and cognitive assessments?
Oh, it's a good one. I'm on the fence about personality profile, and I have to say this. I think that the challenge with this is that recruiters and hiring managers, where they're privy to the data produced through those assessments, see it as black and white as opposed to a developmental guideline. My
Yeah.
opinion, and it is my opinion only, is that personality profiles provide you with generic insight into someone's preferences, but there are learned behaviors that are adopted based on exposure. For example, mine would tell you that I don't particularly like sitting trouting through Excel spreadsheets. Like that does not bring me joy.
Yeah.
However, the insight that I get from that in being able to make better decisions and influence and design the right solutions as well is
Mm.
critical to my role. Therefore, I will spend the time. So
Yep.
it's not black and white, and that's what's really tricky. It's got to be
Mm.
in context of skills, the experience, the knowledge, the potential, the
Mm.
personality, the motivational alignment, as well as
Yes.
the personality profile. And I think it's
Yes.
kind of like very, very black and white. Like they are yes because they tick these boxes, or it's no because they haven't quite got where they've gotten to. A really good example of this a few years ago, or quite a number of years ago actually, we produced a personality profile report for hiring managers. And we were really excited about it. We're like, here we go. The hiring manager gets better insight. We're giving them data. We're being data driven about our recruitment process. And what we found was that there was so much bias in the response. It was like they got a 3 out of 5 on this, therefore it's a no. But that particular capability was not a key requirement. It wasn't a prioritized capability. It was a capability that's made up of many, if that makes sense. It wasn't one of the top 3 or 4. So we gave too much information, and that influenced negatively, and we ended up losing candidates because of it. Then we went for
Yep.
a block approach. So rather than a 3 out of 5, out of 5 metric scale, we put blocks in, like 3 blocks to try and help. That didn't work either. Then we tried just commentary, and that also didn't help. And then we ended up pulling back and going, we're just going to talk to you about this instead of giving you the actual information. So you've just got to
Right.
find the right balance to go, how do I provide you with insight, but in context of everything else, in context of the
Yes.
conversation I've had with the candidate and why I'm recommending them, the
Yes.
context of potential and things that we've seen through the digital interview, or what AI has produced as predictive
Yes.
analytics, and
Yes.
that data point as well to make a wholesome decision.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of, I think this is where AI is going to go. It's going to incorporate personality assessment into assessment of other data points as well, and provide a sort of an assimilated or consolidated assessment that includes multiple components, as you say, motivation, potential learning ability, personality, because it's absolutely got to be used in context. And I think, Mike, from my experience as well, is really stressing to clients that you've got to integrate it into the process. It's not a standalone. You don't want to be making decisions on it as a standalone instrument.
Yeah, for sure. And it comes
Yeah.
back to that success profile as well. If you anchored the selection process in a success profile, and the skills, the capabilities, the behaviors, and the requirements and the challenges that you have, and then you anchor the selection outcomes, the assessments, the realistic job previews, digital interview response, personality profile to that success profile, then that provides that real insightful sort of fit, not fit. There's some
Mhm.
brilliant technology now for internal recruitment as well that Workday has introduced that allows skill job to human match from an employee to a job perspective. So what I mean by that is the company's key capabilities, skills, and proficiency, and then the individual's basket of skills that they bring, the skills that they've gathered throughout their career, and provides a match. So strong, fair, medium match. It's brilliant from a recruiter and a hiring manager perspective, because you get data, like detailed insight into the skills that someone has, and where there might be some gaps, but also for the candidate to be able to see that, or the employee to go, oh, I'm missing these skills. I can now focus on building towards those so that next time I apply, I can add them to my profile and then I get a match. So it's
Yeah.
so much more wholesome a process when you've got that kind
Mm.
of robustness. And
Yeah.
historically, we've not had that. We've had a, I'm sorry, you're not right because there's a better candidate. So
Yeah.
AI
Mm.
gives us, particularly when combined with skills data, gives us that robustness to help, again, the candidate not hit a brick wall at the end of a process, but perhaps start a development pathway as a
Yes.
means to in which to reach their goals.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The idea of it being a continual process. This is not the end.
Yeah,
This actually helps you to move to the next stage.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, you talked about wicked problems. Is there one wicked problem that at the moment is really challenging you, that you think this is where we need to really try and focus our attention, because this is something that kind of keeps you awake at night, shall we say?
Candidate experience is definitely what keeps me awake at night. I think it's trying to
Right.
find the balance between getting the right data and, doing that. I always say to my recruiters, we're almost like private investigators. We're looking at
Mm,
assessment data, digital interview outcomes, what's captured in the application form, what's on someone's resume, to be able to predict whether they're a good fit or not. And the
mm,
challenge with that is that we're capturing so much data. And
mm,
when someone of the talent acquisition partner might apply for a role, we're not capturing that data. They're not going through that rigor. So is it fair and reasonable from a volume perspective to expect someone to, go through all of those processes and take so much time, and then,
mm.
ultimately get a no when
Yeah.
they might go to interview. So
Yeah.
I feel like we're letting our frontline volume candidates down at the moment by putting too much in. I definitely want to focus on reduction and finding the right balance of capturing data, giving the candidate the right preview to avoid that job shock, but also, not making people do hours and hours of work for an
Yes.
entry level role as well.
Yeah. And that's where I think AI will, I think, eventually produce an assessment that captures all of that data, but in a smaller amount of questions or smaller amount of tasks
Yep, for
for
sure.
people to do, and then also potentially maybe bringing that kind of assessment further up the chain.
Yeah. And yeah, 100%. And I think it's more intuitive as well. It can, some of the tech vendors now can do what are you looking for? What motivates you? Like, share your preferences and then predict a role, rather than someone just applying for the wrong role with multiple companies and getting rejection, just not really understanding why. So,
Mm,
we've got an obligation to help our candidates to kind of navigate for a career. I think we'd all do it if we had the capacity and time. We'd spend time with every candidate, because we're not just there about selecting candidates for the company. We also want to coach and try and help support people to get the outcome that they want in their career. It
mm,
allows us to kind of step more towards that career counseling, support, advice
mm,
part of consulting, as opposed to
mm.
just the selection based yes or no outcome.
Yeah.
And I think for more of the experience, specialized hires, it's then being able to recognize where there are gaps in a resume and giving candidates that outcome. For example, if we're looking for an agile practitioner, but you're missing agile methodology or agile principles, or you haven't practiced this particular skill, being able to provide feedback on that based on the requirements that have been set from that success profile anchor point again, that's
Mm.
going to help more qualified candidates as well. And therefore, even for technical roles or specialist roles, provide a much better candidate experience.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot to attend to, isn't there, at
Mm,
the moment? A
for sure.
very, very exciting time. And it seems like you've really put your mind. I mean, obviously you've been involved in the industry for such a long period of time, but you've really put your mind to these things. And it sounds like you are solving many of the problems,
Working on
as
it for sure.
certainly as best as you can for the time being, because there's going to be more problems that are thrown up. But yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for coming on. I really
Pleasure.
appreciate that, your great wisdom and passion for recruitment and selection generally. It really shines through. Yeah, so wish you all the best. Thank you very much for being a guest on the show.
No worries at all. See you soon. Thanks,
Thanks,
Paul.
Sarah.
See you all.
Okay, bye
Bye.
bye.